Hello, good morning and good afternoon to everybody. Welcome again to this Info Day for Cluster 5. This session will cover other funding opportunities. So where you will be seeing and you will be presented some funding opportunities and topics coming from other cluster of Horizon Europe. Now, who am I? My name is Andrea Gentili. I'm deputy of the unit C3 in RTD. And the unit is in charge for aviation, waterborne, coal and steel. I will be chairing this session. I will be moderating the session. Please put your question in Slido. I will try to make sure that all the questions will be answered as much as possible. You can see in the screen the Cluster 5 Info Days Q code for the session. Now, what kind of topics you will be presented during this session? Topics from Cluster 4. Which is the cluster fully dedicated to industry, digital and space, and Cluster 6. Cluster 6 is the cluster dedicated to food, bioeconomy, natural resources, agriculture, and environment. So I think that without wasting any time, you are eager to listen to my colleagues. So you can see all of them. There will be several colleagues presenting the different slides. We will start from Cluster 6. And we will start with my colleague Caroline, and she will present some of the topics interesting for you in Cluster 6. Caroline, the floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Caroline Potier. I work in DG Research and Innovation. And I'm going to introduce, as Andrea mentioned, the first work program of Horizon Europe, Cluster 6. Next slide, please. I'm going to, with a brief introduction to Cluster 6, then I will focus on funding opportunities in a specific destination, land, oceans, and water for climate action. And finally, I will quickly cover other opportunities in the rest of the work program. Next slide, please. Let's start with general aspects on Cluster 6. The structure of the work program is defined by the intervention logic of the cluster, which is the result of an intense co-creation process. First, 6 long-term expected impacts for research and innovation activities in Cluster 6 have been identified. They serve as the foundation for corresponding destinations in the relevant work program parts. In Cluster 6, the following impacts correspond to one destination. First, climate neutrality and adaptation to climate change. And you can immediately see that it is of interest for in relation to Cluster 5. Then we have preservation and restoration of biodiversity and ecosystems. We have food and nutrition security for all from sustainable food systems from farm to fork. We have identified balanced development of rural, coastal, and urban areas. And finally, innovative governance models enabling sustainability, including environmental observation. So these 5 following impacts correspond to one destination. The destinations are big chapters of the work program. And then we have one impact on sustainable and circular management of natural resources, tackling pollution and bioeconomy, which corresponds to 2 destinations, so meaning 2 chapters of the work program. And this decision to split this impact was to better correspond to the European Green Deal initiatives. As a result, the work program is structured along the 7 destinations listed in the right column of the slide. Since biodiversity and ecosystem services are the backbone of the cluster, which gathers sectors directly dependent on healthy ecosystems, we have put this emblematic destination first in the work program. Next slide, please. So here we have listed the destinations, the 7 destinations I've presented, with the corresponding calls in 2021. For the destination biodiversity and ecosystem services, 2 calls have been launched in 2021, since a dedicated call was needed to launch the European Partnership Rescuing Biodiversity to Safeguard Life on Earth. All calls opened on the 22nd of June, and their deadline is 6 October 2021, except the call corresponding to the Biodiversity Partnership, for which the deadline is 22 July. Next slide. So I'm going to briefly speak about budget. Cluster 6 work program is quite ambitious, not only in its objectives, but also with the dedicated budget. More than 1.9 billion euros will be spent over 21 and 22. This represents a very important increase compared with the budget dedicated to comparable areas and sectors under Horizon 2020. The budget for 2021 is around 1 billion euros, and for 2022 around 900 million euros. The 2030 biodiversity strategy and the Farm to Fork strategy are key Green Deal initiatives for this cluster and overall, and will benefit from a substantial support in 21, with respectively 215 million and 186 million euros allocated to the corresponding calls. The calls corresponding to the circular economy and bioeconomy sectors, to clean environment and zero pollution, and to climate action and to communities are allocated respectively 127, 65, 108 and 53 millions. New governance models will be crucial to achieve the Green Deal objectives. In addition, the corresponding call include strategic areas such as environmental observation, digitalization, and the system of advice to farmers. On this call, we will spend 223 million euros. Next slide, please. Next slide. I'm going now to focus on the destination land, ocean, and water for climate action, which is fully dedicated to actions on climate. We have one call launched for 2021. This call includes 10 topics on the first impacts of climate change on land and marine environments, natural resources, including freshwater resources, agriculture, forestry, and food systems. We have also one topic on strengthening the ocean climate nexus knowledge. And we have also some topics on mitigation potential of ecosystems and sectors based on the sustainable management of natural resources, including the role of agriculture to reduce and mitigate greenhouse gas emissions and to enhance carbon sinks. We have topics on the resilience of agriculture and forestry to climate change. And we mostly focus on large-scale deployment and uptake of solutions, including nature-based solutions in this area. Next slide. The policy context is, of course, the European Green Deal, in particular, the climate law and everything related to climate. Agriculture and forestry will notably have an important role to play for the EU to reach its climate objectives, not only in terms of reduction of emission of greenhouse gas emission, including methane and other very powerful greenhouse gases, but also in terms of carbon sequestration. A specific long-term objective on climate has therefore been identified for Cluster 6, as I already mentioned. In details, it reads, neutrality is achieved by reducing greenhouse gas emissions, maintaining natural carbon sinks, and enhancing the sequestration and storage of carbon in ecosystems, including by unfolding the potential of nature-based solutions, production systems on land and at sea, as well as rural and coastal areas where adaptations to climate change are also being fostered for enhancing resilience. Topics in this destination are expected to contribute to a number of impact areas of the strategic plan beyond climate. Next slide. So in the destination on climate in Cluster 6, we have more precisely identified impacts. First of all, a better understanding and enhancing the mitigation potential of ecosystems and sectors. Then support adaptation of and resilience of natural and managed ecosystems and economic sectors. Then efficient monitoring, assessment, and projections related to climate change impacts, mitigation and adaptation potential in order to bring out solutions for tackling emerging threats and support decision-making. And fostered climate change mitigation in the primary sector, so including the farming sector and forestry, including by the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, maintenance of natural carbon sinks, and enhancements of sequestration and storage of carbon in ecosystems. We have also identified the need to improve adaptive capacity of water and soil systems by unlocking the potential of nature-based solutions in particular. And finally, also the need to better manage scarce resources, in particular soils and water, thus mitigating climate-related risks, in particular desertification and erosion. Next slide. So the budget for the 2021 call is 118 million for 10 topics, which include 7 research and innovation actions, 2 CSAs, and 1 co-funded partnership. Next slide. So we have 2 topics on water and 1 topic on the ocean climate nexus. First, the first topic on water is to improve understanding, observation, and monitoring of water resource availability. It is expected to support 2 or 3 projects for a total budget of 10 million euros. The second topic is the basis of the European Partnership Water Security for the Planet. The acronym is Water for All, which is a co-funded partnership. The EU intends to support this partnership with 126 million euros over the 7 years. The third topic is a research and innovation action to better understand key oceanic and polar processes driving regional and global climate change, with a budget of 15 million euros for 2 projects. Next slide, please. Topic 4 is a big CSA with 23 million euros to support a demonstration network on climate-smart farming, with the objective of linking pilot farms. Topics 5 and 6 are research and innovation actions on agroecological approaches for climate change mitigation, resilient agriculture production and enhanced biodiversity, and resilient livestock farming systems under climate change, with budgets of respectively 7 and 12 million. Topic 7 is a CSA to support the International Research Consortium on soil carbon with 3 million euros. Topics 8 and 9 are 2 research and innovation actions related to forestry, one on agroforestry with a budget of 8 million, and another one on the capacity of forests to mitigate climate change with a budget of 10 million euros. Finally, topic 10 is a research and innovation action for a targeted cooperation with China on increasing the resilience of forests with a budget of 10 million euros. Next slide, please. Now I would like to go quickly to give a quick overview on opportunities in the other calls of Cluster 6. First, the calls on biodiversity and ecosystem services have important connections with climate. At least 4 of the expected impacts identified in the destination are related to climate. The first impact, climate change as a driver of biodiversity decline. Second, the nature-based solutions. Third, relations between climate and biodiversity. And fourth, in the area of transformative change and do not harm principle. Next slide. A list of topics which can represent funding opportunities in the area of climate is presented on this slide. So I think I'm not going to go into the details of each topic, but there are opportunities in the area of nature-based solutions, ecosystem services, maritime spatial planning, and identification of protected areas, transformative changes, support to processes triggered by IPBES and IPCC. And the last topic corresponds to the European Partnership on Biodiversity. Next slide. On the destination farm to fork, climate is embedded in all the impacts. Impacts are about sustainable farming, sustainable fisheries and aquaculture, and food systems. And in particular, food systems are expected to deliver co-benefits for climate mitigation and adaptation. Next slide. In this specific area of food systems, I would like to mention 3 research and innovation actions on alternative proteins and dietary shift, social norms towards zero food waste, and transition to healthy and sustainable dietary behavior. Next slide. The call on circular economy and bioeconomy sectors is particularly important. Topics here are expected to lead to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. For instance, we have a research and innovation action on increasing the circularity in textiles, plastics, and or electronics value chains. Next slide. The call on a clean environment and zero pollution may also be of special interest. For instance, a research and innovation action on increasing the environmental performance of industrial processes in bio-based sectors, construction, woodworking, textiles, pulp and paper, and biochemicals. Next slide. In the area of resilient, inclusive, healthy, and green rural, coastal, and urban communities, we have also an important component on climate. Next slide. I would like to finish now with the last destination, which is about innovative governance, environmental observations, and digital solutions in support of the Green Deal, which was designed to build innovative governance models. But this call will also support the benefits of the deployment and exploitation of environmental observation. Next slide. Just to mention a few relevant topics in this destination, a research and innovation action on modeling land use and land management in the context of climate change, a CSA to prepare for pre-commercial procurement for end-user services based on environmental observation in the area of climate change adaptation and mitigation, and 2 innovation actions on tools to support the uptake and accessibility, exploitability of environmental observation information, and to provide more accessible and exploitable environmental observation data in support of the European Green Deal priority actions. Thank you for your attention.
Very good. Thank you very much, Caroline, for this overall presentation of Cluster 6. I can see also other colleagues who may reply to questions, if any, in relation to Cluster 6. I can see Larissa. Let me encourage again to use the slide for the questions. Apparently, we got only one question, which is in relation to the link between those funding opportunities and the 5 missions. I would suggest, on the contrary, to take all the questions at the end, so that if my colleagues are confirming me that the Cluster 6 has been fully presented, without hesitation, we can go to the presentation of Cluster 4. And for this, I would like to come on stage, on this virtual stage, my colleague Nicolas. Nicolas, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrea. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As Andrea said, my colleagues and I will introduce Cluster 4, Digital Industry and Space. If I can have the first slide of Cluster 4, please. Cluster 4, Digital Industry and Space, is essentially about developing digital industry and space technologies and securing open strategic autonomy. Its goals are to secure to support the twin green and digital transition, to secure resilience, and it has a strong human side. Not surprisingly, Cluster 4 has many, can we go back to the earlier slide, please? Not surprisingly, Cluster 4 has strong links to Cluster 5. In this presentation, which is inevitably short, 2 of my colleagues from Cluster 4 and I will briefly introduce some of the most relevant topics. In general, I can say that we have worked closely with colleagues and stakeholders in Cluster 5 in order to eliminate overlaps, but also to develop complementarities. Next slide, please. So before I give the floor to my 2 colleagues from Cluster 4, I will talk about essentially 2 groups of topics in Cluster 4 to do with the construction industry and with the energy-intensive industries. So we have first a group of 3 topics that are there to support the construction industry. And of course, they complement in an obvious way the Build for People partnership in Cluster 5. These topics are not in a partnership, they are normal topics, and we have 3 of those in 2021 and more coming in 2022. And essentially, they are about the construction side of buildings. They are about more automated construction, digitized construction, human-centered construction, and so on. In the next 3 slides that I'm not going to spend any more time on, but which we provide for your reference, you will see more details of those these 3 topics. That they have a deadline at on the 23rd of September. So if we can briefly go over these 3 slides. So these slides give you more detail about the funding levels of those topics and the expected outcomes. And if we now move to the next slide, I will say a few words about the topics in Cluster 4 that support the energy-intensive industry. And those serve 2 partnerships, the Processes for Planet and the Clean Steel partnerships. We have a large number of topics there. but we have chosen some of the most relevant ones that have the most direct links to cluster 5. And these topics are, first of all, about circularity of resources in the process industries. And they include topics for carbon direct avoidance in steel, as well as improvement of the yield of the iron and steel making industries. Those are innovation actions. They are fairly large topics. And there we hope to make a substantial contribution both to climate action and to the circularity through the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, as well as to the circular economy. Then there are two more topics that are about integration of renewables and electrification in the process industry. And they are about designing energy flexible processes for in the process industry. And another topic for the steel industry to prepare for the transition towards climate neutrality. Again, these topics are innovation actions, so they foresee demonstrators and they go to technology readiness levels 6 and 7. So in the next 4 slides that once again I will go over quickly, you will see the same kind of outline for these 4 topics. And I will not spend much more time on those slides as our time is so limited. And before I hand the floor to the next colleague from Cluster 4, I would also like to say that this is only a selection of topics from, if you like, the industry part of Cluster 4, but there are more topics that are relevant. In particular, Cluster 4 makes a large contribution to raw materials and to advanced materials. And of course, indirectly, these activities also make a contribution to the priorities of an upstream contribution, if you like, to the priorities of Cluster 5. And they are worth bearing in mind. If you want more information, you can follow the recordings of the Cluster 4 Info Days that took place on the 29th and the 30th of June. And on the same site as Cluster 5, on the Cluster 5 Info Days, you will find the recordings of the Cluster 4 Info Days, including those topics. And with that, I will hand the floor to my colleague Cecilia, who is going to tell us about the artificial intelligence support in Cluster 4.
Thanks a lot, Nicholas. Thank you also, Andrea, to invite us in this session. So I come from the unit Robotics and AI Innovation and Excellence. So you will understand the perspective of my presentation. Our goal is to improve the technology and show in use cases how it can help to address societal and environmental challenges as well. So the first topic I'm going to present is the one on AI, data, and robotics for the Green Deal. As you all know, these technology can have a very important impact on the Green Deal, and this is one of the action which supports to demonstrate that. So the first call is about innovation action. The budget for that topic is 27 million. We have 2 types of action: the more focused one on 3 million, and the broader one at 5 million. I'll explain in a second. These are innovation actions. So you start from tier 3 to 5 and to 6 to 7. Next slide. Yeah, we have 3 main expected outcomes. So one is about resource optimization and minimization of waste, energy, or greenhouse gas emissions. So how those technology could help to progress on that matter. The second expected outcome is about environmental and waste management in the circular economy. And the third one is about robotic solution in harsh environment serving the Green Deal. It can be any environment, being water, being outdoors, and so on. So what is important is that the proposer have to select one of the 3, because we will then select and make sure that we have a good portfolio coverage. It's important to make that clear in your proposal. Next slide, please. So for that, Next. Yeah, our goal is really to integrate and optimize AI data and robotics solution to demonstrate how they can contribute to the Green Deal, and the proposal will have to be driven by use case and demonstrate how the technology can improve its performance during the project and show the added value to the application field. So it's important also to measure the environmental impact and measure the progress throughout the project. So it's very also important to have a deep involvement of all the relevant stakeholders, being the use case owner, being the technology provider, and also the expert who knows how to measure, for instance, the environmental impact in a meaningful way. Next slide, please. So we have foreseen 3 types of demonstrator depending on the focus of your technology. So it could be robotics only, where you have, for instance, the third case you saw before, using robotics in harsh environment, or a mix of robotics and non-robotic solutions. So AI solution where you combine big data and robotics, for instance, when you want to have application in waste management. And the third one is about only AI and data-driven when you want to, for instance, optimize any processes such as energy distribution, where you only work with data. So the types of proposal we have, either focused project where you bring together in the proposal both the industry user industry having the use case and the technology provider, and they focus on solving these use cases and show how the technology can contribute. The larger project are different projects, 5 million euro. They must use the financial support system to third party, and it means that they have to cascade some of the funding, at least 40% of the budget. And the goal is you have the owner of the problem in the consortium, they define what needs to be addressed, and then with the call for proposal, then you invite technology provider to demonstrate how they can solve these issues. Next slide, please. The second type of call I wanted to present is pushing the limit of robotics cognition. These are research and innovation actions. So the goal here is to improve the technology. The budget is not 4, but 5 million euro per project. We start from TRL 2 to 3 and go to 4 to 5 as per definition of research and innovation action. Next slide, please. So the goal here is to create the next generation of AI-powered robotics. We want robots to improve their capacity to perceive the environment, to understand the environment, and therefore to increase their level of autonomy so that they can provide better help to the user. They would then need less supervision because they can anticipate, they can adapt, and they can continue working on autonomously for a longer period of time. And the more autonomous robot will also provide the next generation of interactive robots, which are better and more intuitively responding to the user need. Next slide, please. So we are here calling for 2 types of project, either the one focusing on bigger autonomy of robotic systems. So we want robots to be smarter, to increase their capability to move, to manipulate, to achieve more complex functionalities and increase their autonomy. The other one are the one focusing on better human-robot interaction. Of course, they must be safe because you're interacting with a physical body, and they must be reliable. We want to see an advanced level of reactivity, mutual understanding between the human and the robot, and also having a real human-centric adaptation. So it should be as smooth as possible for the human user. Next slide, please. And what is important here is we expect every proposal to demonstrate the improvement in 3 real-world scenarios. So while the focus is on science and progressing the technology, we want to see how eventually this has the potential to contribute to applications. So that's why it's important to bring in the use of the technology in the future perspective, and they have to measure the functional performance. So this can be linked to any kind of application, and for sure, any of the one we saw, for instance, in Destination 6 or in Destination 5, like mobility and so on, are relevant for this call. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I guess we can go to the next slide. Yes, thank you. My name is Henri Back from DG Connect, and what I'm going to present is one of the topics, ionics and photonics. We've selected, I would say, the greenest one, and it's called Functional Electronics for Green and Circular Economy. But it's part of a full set of topics addressing, for many of them, critical issues and a way to implement the Green Deal. Next slide, please. Yep, thank you. In fact, it is part of a broader set and a broader, as you know, we in EU, we have this motto, United in Diversity. We talk about electronic component and system. As it goes, it's about integration in diversity, integrating a number of hardware technologies. And here on this slide, we have listed the key ones. And the challenge is then to integrate this technology into a meaningful component, whether it is a sensor, an actuator, any type of integrated digital component. But more of that is also about to co-design a system, to co-design a component based on all these technologies, and to co-design and also to eco-design. Eco-design is an important aspect, and for this first call in the cluster 4, we are focusing on a topic called flexible and printed electronics, which is an area which used to be called plastic electronics. So it's a paradox that we're pushing this area greener to the greenest possible direction. Next slide. Thank you. And this is part of what we have as a holistic approach on functional electronics. Functional electronics being at the intersection of a number of technologies, advanced nanoelectronics, that's basically based components, electronics, packaging and integration. And this I would like to focus today, flexible and wearables. And this is, as we will see on the next slide, please. Okay, next, yeah. So this is the topic, functional electronics for green and circular economy. We have a total budget of 35 million euro. The call as a summit by 21st of October. We are calling for research and innovation actions and looking for a project in the EU funding range 3 to 5 million. In terms of technology readiness level, it starts quite low, TRL 2, 3, and with the objective of ending the project at TRL 4 or 5. Next slide. The expected outcomes from this topic is to have a European leadership in the area of flexible and organic electronics and put forward new concepts for design and technologies for circular economy and sustainability. Those are the green part of it. And to prepare the next generation components and systems to deliver climate neutral digital solutions. The scope of this topic is threefold. First of all, and the most important one, to propose technological breakthroughs in functional electronic technologies and addressing the challenges and opportunity of green and digital put forward is the importance to implement eco-design principles for reduction of energy and resource consumption, and also for low-cost, lightweight. So those are the three elements in the scope. Next slide. The focus, as the title says, is about using and demonstrating new types of substrate and integrate those in textiles, plastics, glass, paper, or metal more. Improve the system risk performance reliability issue in this domain, and also to address manufacturing aspects and to be sure that the project is providing a viable manufacturing process at the end of the line. If it's not about demonstrating that, but that it is compatible with large area manufacturing processes. The application domains are quite broad. Wearable, mobility, transport, for example, conformable systems in the automotive, in the car, health and well-being, monitoring patches, agriculture and environment, monitoring, for example, monitoring fields and optimizing watering, energy and smart logistics. And again, the eco-design principles to be applied, including recovery and recycling solutions, and the optimization of the use of resources. Next slide, please. Yeah. Next slide. And this is my last slide, just to point out the wide variety of elements in eco-design. It starts from the raw material, it ends up with the recycling and afterlife material reuse. So this is, as a conclusion, one topic which is important in addressing the Green Deal, and of other topics in electronics do address low power consumption in general, which is one element of climate neutral in this twin digital and green transformation. With that, I will. I'm done, and if you have any question, I will be happy to answer. Thank you, and thank you again, Andrea, for this kind invitation.
Many thanks to the colleagues in Cluster 4 for having provided us of some relevant topics for the community of energy, the community of transport, the community of climate change. I just would like to remind you one important element, and at the same time, let me encourage you to ask a question through Slido, where for the moment we have this question, and which is the following. You might have noticed that all the topics have been presented with two focuses. One is in which way those topics are linked to the policy objectives, which could be the European Green Deal, the greening, the reduction of emissions, or whatever. And the second, in terms of impact, expected impact. So while writing your proposals, I think it's very important for all of you to remind those two focuses, because we need to understand clearly during the evaluation, we need to understand in which way the technology or the research you are proposing is at the same time responding to a policy needs and at the same time as well has a concrete deliverables which can ensure a real impact. And this is no matter if it is an innovation action or a search and innovation action. The only difference, of course, being the level of TRL that the potential demonstrators will be reached. And having said this, I'm just looking at this slide. Who wants to take the question on the links between the funding opportunities and the 5 missions in cluster 4 or cluster 6? Who wants to take that one?
And start maybe.
Yes.
In cluster
Caroline.
6, yes. In cluster 6, we have, of course, quite strong connections with the missions, but the missions have a separate work program part. We have strong connections because we have one mission area on ocean and one mission area on soil health and food, another mission area on climate adaptation. Those thematics are closely related to what we are doing in cluster 6. But I repeat, the work program will be separate. Missions have a wider objective. In principle, they have more tools at their disposal to address the issues at stake. And I would like to recommend to listen to the specific session on missions, which are embedded in cluster 5 and cluster 6 info days. I can speak for cluster 6 in particular. We will have a specific session on the missions on ocean and soil tomorrow at 12.
Very good. Thank you very much, Caroline. This is useful information. I can also mention in relation to cluster 5, there is the mission on cities. The mission on cities, however, for this work program 21 is still in the making. The missions will be developed and you will see clearly topics linked to the mission in the future work program. There will be an update of the work program, in particular in relation to the topics 22. And so you may see those links between the topics and the missions more clearly in the revision of this work program, and for sure in the next work program 23-24. All right. Let me have a look in the Slido. If there are some other questions. Yes, apparently there was. There was a question which is easy to reply when the session will start. Which we started. Apologies with some delays, but the next question was has been. You can see it, I guess. Is there a call that combines energy efficiency and the digital industry, namely improving the energy performance of data centers and crypto mining farms? I don't know who wants to try to give elements for replying to these questions. I don't know, Henri or Nicolas?
Andrea, I can take that one.
Okay, we have 2 volunteers. Wonderful.
Okay, Nicolas, please.
Yes. Sorry about that. I can give some general information first, and then Henri, who is one of the experts, and may wish to complement it, as we don't have so many questions. Cluster 4 is very strong on this issue, and we have a large area of topics. As I said earlier, we have not been able to tell you about all the topics, but there is a large group of topics whose purpose it is both to support the data economy, but also to make the data economy more energy efficient, what we call green digital. So there is, of course, digital for green, which is a separate issue, but there is also green digital, and that is pursued very strongly in across cluster 4. And now perhaps Henri may want to complement this.
Well, Cecile, okay.
Go ahead. I will. Yeah, start and I will complement later.
Okay. Okay. Well, indeed, it's a very relevant question, and it goes through the full value chain. It starts from the components, and indeed, in the electronics and photonics, we have topics insisting on energy consumption and energy. So it's the green digital, but also digital for green, has some topics about, for example, environmental monitoring and optimizing the energy farm development of components and sensors. So it starts from the very bottom at the device and component level, and it goes all the way through the system. And your question relates to data center, and indeed electronic components in data center, communication, intra-communication in the data center is calling for photonic technologies. So part of the photonic is about telecommunication, photonic integrated circuits, and this is to be applied to a number of settings. Data center is certainly one of them. So that's for the energy efficiency. And of course, if we now want to call your attention to KDT-JU, the nanoelectronic KDT, key digital technology joint undertaking, because there's a number of topics, and of course, moving or making smaller transistors is also about energy saving. So it's all across the Horizon Europe in the electronics and photonics, and talking about data center, it's also about the trying to move as much as possible data from the cloud to the edge is a key issue for not only data protection and security and autonomy, but also power consumption. So yes, this question is at the core of many topics. I'm sure Cecile will want to complement and robotics on this question.
Right. And indeed, even in the basic research on AI, we have a topic for greener AI. So more optimized system, which, for instance, would use in a more optimal way the data, more energy efficient way. So it also depends on the architecture you're using, optimized in terms of energy consumption, but using less data when possible, combining data-driven with also knowledge-driven AI. So we have basic research to address that as well. And as Henri said, we also have topics of AI using also AI at the edge. So using the optimized chips for AI and optimizing the whole solution for AI from the cloud to the edge in a way which optimizes the result, but also optimize in terms of consumption. So definitely is on our radar to all of us, both from the basic technology development until the application of AI data and robotics for any greening of the applications.
Thank you very much, Henri. Thank you, Nicolas. Thank you, Cecile. Let me check again to the slide, where I cannot see any new questions. So considering the time, I think that we can run smoothly. We can smoothly go towards the conclusions of this session. Let me thank first Joanna and Irene and their team for the IT, the logistics that they have provided to this Info Day overall, but in particular to this session. Let me thank a lot all the speakers, Caroline, Nicolas, Cecile, Henri, for your excellent presentation, lively presentation. And in particular, let me thank all of you for your patience, for being present. And let me wish all of you a wonderful time in writing the successful proposals. Horizon Europe is waiting for you. I wish you all the best for those proposals that will be hopefully excellent and finally will be selected for funding in Horizon Europe. With that, I think that I can officially close this session. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.